What if I told you there's a device that's been on bass boats for a decade that actually manipulates bass behavior and it's never been banned? This device will cause bass to group up, to feed, to even react to the baits that you're throwing. And hardly anybody talks about it anymore, not because it doesn't work, but because most anglers don't know how to use it right and aren't sure if it actually works or not. Well, I'm about to change all that, and they'll probably ban it. So what am I talking about? In today's video, I'm gonna tell you how to use a Hydrowave. And it really blows my mind. I know a lot of people don't think a Hydrowave makes a difference one way or another, but I can promise you, and I'm not sponsored by Hydrowave. As a matter of fact, if you stay until the end of this video, I will put you a link to a video that I did a few years back when I bought my first Hydrowave, which I bought used and used for years. And I'll still tell you today, and that video was a keeper call, and I wouldn't do without one, but they're way overpriced for what they are. I mean, I am sorry, but the price that these things go for, you can get a pretty good graph for. But I will say this, if you fish in tough waters and waters that are loaded with shad, loaded with baitfish, this will get you 2 or 3 bites a day more than what you will normally get. On a tough day, I think it will get you 2 to 3 more bites, or maybe bit, period, on days when normally you might 0. Now, there's a lot of factors that go into that. You have to make sure you're in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing. And the Hydrowave has a lot of different settings on it. You know, it's got bluegill, pad popping, all this stuff that it can do. It's got crawdads over rocks. But what I'm going to give you today are some key areas that I feel like the Hydrowave is at its best. And one of those, like I said, I can't tell you, because I fish the 4 or 5 lakes that I fish all the time, and I can't tell you that pad popping is going to get you a frog bite, but I would sure try it. I can't tell you that active craws running across rocks going to get you a jig bite, and I have tried that. So, but what I can tell you is when you're in a lake that's got a lot of shad and you're fishing baits that are imitating a shad, you better turn it on. Now, we're going to run through the situations, what I like to use. I'm going to give you the 2 or 3 settings that I like to use, and I'm going to give you some situations when it's at its best. And we'll start by basically breaking it down from spring, pre-spawn, spawn, and post-spawn, through summer, through fall, and through winter. And I'll tell you when it shines. Let's talk about pre-spawn. So the bass are feeding up, right? They're out there chasing those shad, or they're thinking about chasing those shad. Once the water temps get up to about 55, 58, you'll start seeing them, you know, eating those crawdads. Might be a good time to try that craw bait, but I think they really focus on shad more than they do craws. If you got an area that's got both, might be something good to try. I don't have that much experience with the crawl pattern, but there's a few adjustments that I make in cold water. So as the bass are beginning to get active until they're completely active. One is the pattern and the other is volume. Now, One thing about volume, if you're on a lake and you're in a small creek, like most of the lakes where I fish, there's a ton of rock. And so that sound is going to vibrate off the rock. It's going to bounce off the rock. So you don't want it to be too loud. The other setting, I guess I should say 3, is delay. To me, I think if you're running the pattern all the time, the bass get used to it and don't react to it. Do I think it makes bass react? No. But if you've ever been sitting, I was sitting at a boat dock one day, and there was a bass just sitting there, and there was some bluegill around him. And for whatever reason, one of the bluegill kind of darted off, and that turned that bass on. He turned around and was chasing those bluegill that were moving fast and erratic. Even though he had just been sitting there right in the middle of most of them for several minutes. And that's what the Hydrowave does. I can't tell you how many times during the summer that I've been out on the lake and we know the bass are chasing shad, and we'll turn that on, and all of a sudden you'll see shad hitting the surface. You'll see bass busting. As soon as it goes off, you'll see that calm down. And every time it comes on, you see it. So let me jump into the settings that we're going to talk about for spring, and I'm going to show you what we're going to do. So during the early spring, I'm going to do 2 things. When it's really cold or there's a cold front come through, we're going to do finesse. Because a lot of times, early spring, late winter, going to be a lot of the same stuff. The shad are going to be a little slower. They're not going to be moving as much, so we don't want it to be loud. We want it to be maybe a quarter to a third of the sound when it's cold. Now, if you get a good warm-up spell, the shad are really moving, the bass are really feeding, that's when I'm going to go to delayed schooling. Because again, the bass aren't breaking the surface, we're not seeing a lot of topwater yet. Now, on days that maybe you do in pre-spawn, sure, you can go to the 3rd setting, which would be bait blitz or surface bait. But for me, preferably, I'm going to delayed schooling. Now, when it's cold, I'm going to have a longer delay. So we're going to have a delay most of the time of about 45 seconds. When they're more active, we're going to put it on that 30 second. So the volume, the activity, and the amount of movement that we're getting out of the fish are how we're going to tell. Because in my opinion, what it does is it gets those shad moving, and it gets those bass to congregate to those shad. Now, as we get into actual spawn in the spring, that's when I really don't care much about it. I'm not going to use it a whole lot. I don't think it's really going to help a whole lot, because the bass are focused on something else that's not feeding on shad. So I'm generally not going to use it during the spawning, like right up to the last minute when they're making their beds, they're on their beds, and slightly after. Now, there does begin to be a feed after the bass pulls out, and that's when, again, I'm going to go to delayed schooling. But now, as we move into that post-spawn, a couple of settings, depending on what I'm around, that we're going to use, is we're going to use that delayed schooling, or we're going to use the shad spawn. Because that shad spawn, if you're in an area where those shad are up there spawning, it'll keep them spawning for just a little bit longer. And so you'll keep that bite going for a little bit longer in the day. If you have shad that haven't started spawning yet, that delayed schooling is where I'm going to be. Now, the water temperatures are right then, so I'm going to go from maybe a third to a half, depending on how shallow I am and how shallow the bass are and what type of bottom you have. remember, if you're on a mucky bottom lake, a lot of grass, stuff like that, you're not going to get the sound reverberation that I get on these highland, pretty much all rock lakes. So about half is going to be where I'm at. Now, if I'm up in that shad spawn, so if I'm in delayed schooling, I'm probably going to go from a third to a half of the volume. If I'm shad spawn and I'm up shallower, it's going to be a third or a quarter. We're going to cut it down just a little bit more because we're going to be up shallower that time of day. So when you're shallower, hard bottom, you're going to change that a little bit. Now, when you go on, say, a lake that's got a lot of grass or a lot of wood or a mucky bottom, what you want to do is adjust that volume a little higher than what I'm going to use it, because that's going to absorb sound. If you've got, you know, soft bottom lake or a lot of grass, that sort of stuff, it's going to absorb that sound. It's not going to reverberate off of a lot of the stuff. Now, something else, I love to use it when I'm up shallow, fishing shallow, because it will disguise the sounds of me and the boat and the trolling motor, which is another big, you know, a lot of people out here talk about the Hydrowave. They talk about it in sense of, oh, I think it just hides the sound of the boat. I can assure you it does more than hide the sound of the boat. It will get shad fired up and therefore fire the bass up. Now we're moving into summer. The bass are in full feed mode. They are tying on the feed bags. They've moved offshore. They're up shallow. They're busting shad. They're chasing. This is when I'm looking at that bait blitz. If they're busting shad, I'm doing that surface schooling. These are what I want. And this is when I'm going to run it at its loudest. I'm going to run it, you know, halfway to 3/4 of the way. I want it to be good and loud. I want it to fire up every single shad within earshot or sight of where I'm at. And I want it to get those bass fired up so that I can throw a topwater or a moving bait. That's what I'm going to do. You know, just going down the bank and throwing a jig during the summer or a spinner bait when the shad and everything's moved off, the Hydrowave may not do nearly as well for you. It's not really, that's you guys may be the ones that want to really try to use that crawl or that brim pattern when you're going down the bank. During the summer, you've seen a lot of my videos. We are targeting those bass that are feeding on shad. That's what we do pretty much year round. We target bass that are in feeding mode. We've been doing that way before forward-facing sonar for years. So, you know, when these guys that get forward-facing sonar come in and they're like, oh, look, you know, we can see them out here suspended shallow. Hell, boys, I've been doing that. Go look at the videos. I got 10 years worth and probably 4 or 5 years or 8 years or, I don't know, how long has it been, Mike? Probably at least 6 years, 7?
Since the Hydrowave?
Since before I had LiveScope, something like that. So probably
anywhere 6 years.
Yeah. So you know, forward-facing sonar. I mean, I've been doing the same stuff that I'm doing with forward-facing sonar for years before I did YouTube, and for probably at least 6 years to 7 years before I ever, you know, videos before I ever got a LiveScope. Now, let's move on to fall. Fall, I'm going to have it on constantly. Early fall, it's going to be, you know, the bait blitz. It's going to be the surface schooling. And then as we get into the colder, the middle fall, we're going to go delayed schooling. And then we're going to go to as we get into that early winter, that late fall. And a lot of times you're going to let your days decide this. Like, right, you get a cold front in the fall, you're going to go to that finesse. You're going to lower that volume. You're going to lengthen that delay action. During the summer, I'll keep it at a delay, but I'll keep it more in that 15 to 30 seconds. During the fall, the colder we get, the longer the delay is going to be. That's going to be how I position my fall. Volume-wise, as it gets colder, we're going to cut it down. If you have a warm front, we're going to cut it up. It's going to be based on the activity of the bass, but we're then going to kind of revert back to that 1/4 to 1/3 volume level. As we get into the winter, if the bass are still shallow, if the shad are shallower, we're going to keep that volume a little lower, 1/4% volume, and we're going to go to delayed schooling until we're really in that hard winter, and it's going to be finesse at that point. And again, it's going to be 1/4. If you get a good warm up like we've had here, we may cut it up to 1/3, but we're really going to be in that finesse area. Now, a little trick I learned back before forward-facing sonar, something that I enjoy. One of the reasons why I love, now my old Triton had a white bottom, but one of the things that I love about this boat, it's got a black bottom. And when those bass are out there deep during the winter time, and I was Damiki rigging, I'm vertical. This works great when you're vertical rigging, you know, spoons, blade baits, Damiki, minnow baits, whatever you want to vertical. Even if you don't have forward facing sonar and you're just using your 2D sonar and you're dropping on these baits, I love to have it. And this is one time I will close that gap down to about every 15 seconds, because I will stop short of where I know that school is, or the area that I want to be jigging or whatever, and I will slowly move up to them, because I think when the bass see that dark bottom, they think it's shad because of the sound on there. So they're not freaked out as much about some big dark cloud moving over top of them, blocking the sun out. Because I know in this lake right here, there's areas where, you know, yesterday, for example, the mouth of this creek, where there's so much shad from top to bottom that you can't even see the bottom on your graphs. It looks like a false bottom. There's so much shad. And that's really how I kind of use my Hydrowave. And you know, we were throwing an A-rig today. We were fishing for bass that were kind of set up at the bottom of blowdowns, laydowns, and there was some shad around. And you know, we could have picked up a jig head minnow and went out there and there was one or two out there chasing, and kind of tracked that down and ground that out. But there's a lot more bass that's on the bank kind of sitting there. And so what we did is we picked up that Alabama rig, we cut on that finesse pattern, and as soon as we cut it on yesterday, we got bites. As soon as we cut it on today, we got bites. We were out here 2 weeks ago and we didn't cut it on. We caught one fish. The very next day we come out and we cut it on, and we go down the same bank and catch 4 within a few minutes. So there should be shad in the area that you're using it, if you're using it for the shad. But there's your Hydrowave. So if I have to do an updated keeper coal and call this a keeper coal, I'm definitely keeping it. We didn't have one on this boat for a year, and we had a drought, and in the tough times is when I love my Hydrowave the most, because I swear to you, when it's tough, you're going to get 1 to 3 bites more than you would have got without it. You know, you might get a lot more when it's good, but when it's tough, you're going to get a bite to 3 bites that you normally wouldn't get. And I mean, we've really tested that. I mean, we've been out day after day, kind of putting that through the grind. So, do I think the Hydrowave is priced fair? Hell no. No. But do I let them price gouge me and buy it anyway? Yes, I do. So there's my opinion on it. See, it's overpriced, but worth what it does for me to get out here and catch a few more fish. And that's really hopefully that helps you guys out. If you don't have one, it helps you decide whether you're going to buy one or whether you're not going to. But I really believe in mine. So, and like I said, I'm not sponsored. Got nothing to do with TH Marine. They barely know who I am. Probably the only reason they know who I am is because I've said hi to them. And if you ask them who Hank Rogers of BassGeek was, if you see them at a show, they'd be like, got no clue. So, you know, I'm not trying to sell. Even if you go buy one, I won't get a penny. Unless you go buy one through Tackle Warehouse. If you do, please go do that, because we will have links in the description there. Like I always say, we don't do memberships or anything like that. We like to be inclusive, include all geeks, put the information out there for all of you, not hide things like this, because I don't think I've seen anybody go through what we just went through on this. Oh, I will say I left one thing out. When the bluegill are on the bed, bluegill spawn, use it and pick up a big swim bait. You'll thank me later. But I don't think I've seen anybody talk about the Hydrowave in depth that we just talked about it, and give you situations where we use it, where it shines, and where we catch more fish because of it. And, you know, so bookmark that Tackle Warehouse or scan that code. Now, if you want to see that first video, when I really just had it for about 6 months to a year, make sure you go check out this video right here. Otherwise, questions, comments in the comment section below. Like it if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe. Make sure you ring that bell so you get the notifications when this video comes out, or any video comes out. Be part of the 100% Watch Squad, and you geeks rock.